What is the strangest mystery that is still unsolved? Story 1. The lost A-bomb off the coast of America, which the US government said not to worry about in the 50s and tried to cover up, was dumped in the ocean in an aviation accident, and it's still lost to this day, 100 times more powerful than what was dropped in Japan. There was this other bomb that fell out of a bomb bay above the US. They told everyone it was fine, but later revealed that 3 out of 4 safety things had been actuated. Story 2. The Oakville Blob. In 1994, there was a rainstorm in Oakville, Washington. Only the raindrops were a strange, clear substance that had the consistency of jello. Lots of people experienced flu-like symptoms after coming into contact with it, and people's dogs and cats all over the city were dying. When a local hospital ran a lab test on the substance after one of the patients suggested it was found that whatever this mysterious rain was, it had human white blood cells in it. Sometime after that, a sample was also sent to the Washington State Health Laboratory, where it was being researched by epidemiologist Mike McDowell. After he determined that it was man-made and speculated that it was some sort of matrix for transporting viruses and bacteria, the samples suddenly went missing from the containment facility, and his supervisor told him not to ask any questions. There are no known samples of the stuff anywhere today, despite being sent to several different facilities by various Oakville residents. So, yeah, I'd personally say that this was clearly some sort of bioweapon test run, but by whom? I'd love to give the US government the benefit of the doubt here and assume it wasn't us testing something like that on our own citizens. But if it wasn't, why would it have been covered up like that? And you'd think an event like this would be a lot less obscure. Also, even if it being a bioweapon seems super obvious, how the hell did whoever dispersed it manage to make it rain over an entire city for several days? Story 3. Magdalena Zuk, a Polish woman who died in Egypt. She had arranged a trip to Egypt at very short notice as a surprise for her partner. He didn't have a valid passport and couldn't get one on time, so she went alone. Almost immediately, she began to act incredibly erratic, but was being helped by a Polish-speaking Egyptian man at the hotel. The hotel didn't want her. The hospital turned her away, and when she tried to board an earlier flight home, she was not allowed to board because of her behavior. Eventually, she was admitted to a hospital, but, despite being restrained, managed to jump out of the window. The boyfriend had arranged for a mutual friend to come get her, but he arrived to find her dead. This conversation with her boyfriend is one of the most disturbing things I've seen. There is evidence that the Egyptian man actually knew the boyfriend, and theories that the boyfriend was somehow in on all of this, which is all very bizarre, considering she planned the trip without him even knowing. Story 4. 3 lighthouse workers with impeccable mustaches traveled to a remote island on December 7, 1900, for a lighthouse shift that should have lasted for 2 weeks. When a boat arrived to pick them up, they were gone. No trace of the bodies. And the lighthouse was strangely locked. Not only was the setting normal, meal ready to be served, but there was no fire in the fireplace, and the clock had stopped. One of the men kept a log in a diary, and he said that the seas were rough one day, but when monitored, it was actually calm. No one knows what happened to them. Story 5. The Overtown Bridge. It's a bridge in Scotland where dogs always inexplicably jump off. It's very strange, and nobody knows for certain why they do this. Dogs who survived reportedly walked back up and jumped off again. They even had to put up a warning sign to keep your dog on a leash and to watch them. A lot of theories say maybe it's because of certain scents or animals down below, but most people have disagreed with this theory. It's really weird. Story 6. The Salish Sea Feet, or the Mad Axemen of New Orleans. The Salish Sea Feet are the approximately 20 dismembered feet found in or around British Columbia or Washington, USA. The feet sometimes are found still inside of shoes. No one knows how they got there or where they came from. Over the course of the last 13 years, the authorities have ruled out foul play. The Mad Axeman of New Orleans ran rampant in 1918 and 1919. He assassinated 6 people, usually those of Italian descent, with axes or straight razors. In March of 1919, he sent a lengthy letter from hottest hell that was pretty nonsensical, but the most relevant paragraphs read, "Now, to be exact, at 12:15 earthly time next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music. And I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well, then so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe." There were no murders that night, because every dance hall in New Orleans, Louisiana was filled to capacity. Story 7. How a lower-class Englishwoman became an important Egyptian scholar based on her memories from her supposed past life as an ancient Egyptian priestess. She actually described a garden in an ancient temple that was later discovered matching her description, and in the location she said it was. She knew things that had not been published before, and had been worshipping ancient Egyptian gods from the age of 3. Story 8. The whereabouts of the last Gestapo chief, Heinrich Müller. The last verified sighting of him was in Berlin roughly 3 days before it fell. He had stated he knew full well what the Russians did to prisoners, and he had no intentions of being captured. As chief of the Gestapo, he more than likely had access to foreign documents as well as ways to replicate them. Both the CIA and the KGB spent time looking for him, but no trace has ever been found. Story 9. This is my favorite weird and barely known one. Back in 2013, an unknown group hit a power substation in California. By all appearances, it was pretty sophisticated. Scouted firing positions, all casings wiped of prints. They targeted transformers so they'd take time to overheat before triggering any alarms, and also knew exactly when the police would arrive. No suspect or motive to this day. They also cut some fiber optic cables in a vault nearby. Conspiracy types think it was a dry run by Russia or possibly China to see how effective an attack like that might be. Story 10. Unknown person being held at Canada's maximum security prison for 7 years refuses to identify himself, and no one knows who he is. Caught in 2013 for fraud, he claimed to be Herman Emmanuel Fankum, a French national residing in Montreal. But when French authorities were contacted for deportation, they claimed that his papers were forged, and they have no record of him. Further investigations across 11 countries revealed that he appeared in several other nations under different aliases, but no confirmation of real identity. He's uncooperative and refuses to reveal his real identity and past. Without his identity, police cannot deport him. So, he is stuck in the Max Sec prison. He was supposed to testify publicly before the Immigration and Refugee Board, but the hearing was made private at the last minute with no public and media attention. The dude is most likely a spy for some country and knows he's safer where he is than back home without the package. Story 11. Who was Perseus? From 1943 to 1946, the Soviet Union had a high-level spy in the Manhattan Project, codenamed Perseus. This spy was a scientist at the White Sands Missile Testing Site in New Mexico and the main research facilities in Los Alamos. Perseus saw pretty much the entire project start to finish, giving the Russians everything they needed to get to work on their own bomb. The fact that they were able to do so within 4 years of the end of World War II, when their nations were still devastated, is proof positive that Perseus helped a great deal. And to top it all off, Perseus was never caught or positively ID'd. Story 12. What on earth happened to the Tromp family? So it's this Australian family who owned a berry farm. Somehow, Mr. and Mrs. Tromp and their 3 grown kids developed the belief that they weren't safe and they needed to flee their farm without cell phones or anything traceable, credit cards, etc. It sounds like the oldest son wasn't sold on whatever it was that led them to flee. He brought his phone, but eventually it got tossed from the car. He ended up bailing first and taking a train home. From there, the rest of the family slowly separated and suffered from various degrees of emotional breaks. The two girls stole a car. Somehow they got separated and one made it home, but the other was found on the floor in the back seat of some guy's car in a catatonic state. He spotted her after he started down the road. Eventually, the parents were found wandering around aimlessly. Fortunately, they were all okay physically, but what the hell happened? Was someone actually after them? Were they delusional? As far as I know, the family hasn't released any updates. Story 13. The identity of and what happened to D.B. Cooper. A man on a plane called himself D.B. Cooper and claimed to have a bomb in his suitcase. He took the flight crew hostage, and when he got the money he asked for, he had the flight crew start flying again. Eventually, he jumped out of the plane with a couple of parachutes and the money. No one knows where he went or if he even survived. Story 14. In 1994, close to 100 school children, 60 on record, described seeing a disc-shaped craft land behind their school during morning break time in Ruwa, Zimbabwe. Many of them interacted with beings that fit the gray alien description, with the children receiving what is described as some sort of telepathic communication. They all stick to their stories to this day. Story 15. We still have no definitive proof of who this Socrates guy is. On one hand, he's mentioned constantly by philosophers from his time, often used as an example character, and several works are attributed to his name. On the other hand, we have countless legal records and consensuses that confirm the existence of Aristotle and Plato, but none that link back to Socrates. He's either a very prolific philosopher or an in-joke that classical philosophers would reference when they didn't know who to attribute quotes to. Story 16. Didn't see it anywhere while scrolling. I'll say the disappearance of Andrew Gosden. He was a British 14-year-old boy with excellent marks, no absence, and apparently really high intelligence. One day, he went out of the house to go to school, but instead of going, he waited in a public park for his parents to leave, then went back and took some affairs. Money, changed clothes. He had a uniform. He put on a Slipknot shirt and his PSP without the charger. He then went to the train station and went to London. The last video of him was at the train station. Apparently, the ticket seller tried to sell him a back ticket for only £1 more, but Gosden refused. The idea was that maybe he wanted to go see the Muse concert that was happening in London this day or week. Later, the group helped publicize the campaign for searching. He was never seen again since that day. No one knows if he's dead, if he had planned to come back. He has no coat, no vest, and he didn't take his passport. Rumor has it that he wanted to try to change life like in a movie he was fond of, The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, in which the main character fakes his death to start a new life. It happened in 2007, so he is 27 today. In 2 days, actually. His birthday is July 10th. Some people think they have seen him. There are reconstitutions of what he would look like, but no one really knows what happened to him. The parents have left the bank account with a lot of money in case he would need it, but he never withdrew anything except for the £100 on the day he disappeared. Story 17. The Kanka La Pass in Ladakh. This region lies in the disputed border of India and China, and is truly the most inaccessible place in the world. In 1962, the armies of both the countries were engaged in a severe conflict. After this, both China and India entered into an agreement according to which none will be allowed to patrol the region, but can keep an eye on it from a distance. After this, a popular belief floated that the Kanka La Pass in Ladakh is a hideous base of UFOs. The area has forever remained a no-man's land due to its territorial limits, and is the reason why the UFOs have chosen it as their operational base. Reportedly, many have seen these UFOs, and both the Indian and Chinese governments are aware of these developments. In 2006, Google Maps baffled the world with some images that looked like military facilities. But to date, the whole issue remains mysterious and unexplained. Story 18. The Winchester Mystery House. I watched a documentary on this house when I was 10, and it has stuck with me ever since. It's about a woman named Sarah Winchester. Her husband and baby both passed away. Her husband owned a rifle company, and she went to a psychic. The psychic told her that she is being haunted by the ghosts of all the people who have died by the hands of those guns. And that is the reason for the tragedy that happened in her life. To appease the spirits, the psychic told her to build a great house for them, and she was not allowed to stop building or tragedy will strike again. She didn't get help from anyone, but she did it and kept building for the next 38 years. There are stairs that lead to nowhere, windows that don't look out, hallways that are wrapped around. It has 161 rooms, and it's huge. Was it really the ghosts? Was she insane? I have no idea, but it's the most interesting story I've ever heard. Story 19. Ball lightning is accepted as a real phenomenon, but is largely a mystery. I first became fascinated with ball lightning as a kid after my grandpa freaked out when a ball of light came in through our back door and followed him to the living room, then disappeared. He told that story again and again until he passed. I was a big fan of the Little House on the Prairie series at the time, and his description sounded similar to what I read. A few years later, my mom was taking a meteorology class, and that reignited my interest in the weather, especially lightning. I loved having her teach me all the stuff she was learning, and we'd watch her required documentaries together. Fast forward to middle school when we finally got a computer, and my interest flared back up. That was about the first time I ran into the concept of ball lightning, and it reminded me of when I was a kid. My mom confirmed my memory of my grandpa's story, and even how eager I was to read him the passages from the book. I check in from time to time to see what new breakthroughs have been made in the area, but it's still really sparse, even today. Story 20. The USS Eldridge, which was allegedly the ship that took part in the Philadelphia experiment. The US government denied that the experiment ever took place, though the ship was sold to the Greek Navy sometime in the 50s and served till the late 90s. My brother-in-law, who was in the Navy, told me that everyone that served on the Leon, the Greek name of the ship, said to him that there was definitely something wrong with it. Doors leading nowhere, cables seemingly appearing out of nowhere, etc. Some even insisted that they were hearing voices in the night. Story 21. The disagreement between quantum and Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics does a great job at predicting everyday things like gravity, acceleration, and the movement of objects through space. Quantum physics is spot on when it comes to predicting really tiny things like light and magnetism, or really large things like black holes. But if you try to use quantum physics to calculate the speed of your car, your numbers will be way off. The two models we use to mathematically describe our universe only work at the scales they were intended for. To paraphrase Einstein, until math can bridge quantum and Newtonian physics, we're looking at some spooky. Story 22. What happened to the Marie Celeste ship? My dad got me a book about it, and as a kid, I've stayed fascinated by it ever since. It's a true Twilight Zone Bermuda Triangle mystery. The people just vanished as if they were about their daily ship life and then disappeared. No signs of attack, nothing stolen. Food is still out and in the ship's hull. The ship was in decent condition, a bit messy but still seaworthy. Its lifeboat was gone, but no one from the ship ever showed up. Story 23. The Amber Room was a chamber decorated in amber panels backed with gold leaf and mirrors, located in the Catherine Palace of Tsarskoye Selo, near St. Petersburg. Constructed in the 18th century in Prussia, the room was dismantled and eventually disappeared during World War II. Before its loss, it was considered an eighth wonder of the world. It still remains unfound. The mysterious Kuldhara village in India is said to be cursed. 200 years ago, it used to be home to approximately 1,500 people, but suddenly, everyone in the village left without a trace. No one knows exactly why, but people say they left the village to escape from evil ruler Salim Singh and his unjust taxes, and while leaving, they left a curse on this place. It's said anyone who tries to live here loses his life, and still remains uninhabited. Not even vegetation is found around this area. Story 24. The Yuba County Five. The strangest mystery I've ever crossed paths with. 5 men, each with some sort of intellectual disability, but still a sound mind, go about their day together, disappear into the dense California forest after going to a basketball game outside of their hometown. They are found dead, except for one, Gary Matthias, who hasn't been found or seen since, after the winter snow had melted, 20 miles away from where they had abandoned their perfectly working car. The thing is, the mountainous snow-surrounded road was nowhere near the route back to their hometown. No one knows why they decided to drive up the mountain road just to promptly abandon it in the middle of a cold winter's night. Story 25. The Death of John Lang. He was a journalist who lived in Fresno, California, and he reported on the police's extortion of the poor. The police started camping outside his house, and several mysterious vehicles repeatedly circled his street. Eventually, his house burned down, and he died. His channel is on YouTube, and his CCTV footage is all up there, available for your perusal. Story 26. The Lost Colony, I believe in the late 1500s, where the whole town disappeared overnight. I remember reading this in elementary school, and I still think about it.